I work and live all my life abroad. My technical knowledge of Russian is about zero, so I continue in English. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult.
Thanks for coming. We are going to speak about building a cyber fortress. And building a cyber fortress is very different from building a regular fortress, because a regular fortress has walls, and the inside of the fortress is supposed to be safe. Due to it being safe, you don't need to protect anything inside the fortress, like the people and the goods. You only care about the walls and you care about the towers. So it basically looks like this. And you have a very visible perimeter. And it has been the case for at least, 20 years. We've been living in this paradigm of needing a perimeter security. And some people are still living in this paradigm. I've had discussions even here with several people, and they still believe perimeter security is important, which is not really the case. In this old paradigm, you have several layers of security. You have the outer layer, which is your gateway and your firewall. You have controls. And the inner layer is your most important asset. Usually that's the data. And with the current attacks, this has changed. It has changed because what is being attacked right now is not your perimeter, mostly. It is your endpoint. And in order to protect the data, you need to protect the endpoint. Be it, even if the endpoint is the smartphone or a tablet or a laptop or a computer or a server, it doesn't matter. Your endpoint is what you need to protect. And since it's very difficult to visualize what a cyber fortress is, because our view of a fortress is what you see on the screen, I've asked a friend of mine who is an artist to create this painting, this abstract painting. And as you can see, there are nodes and there is no wall anywhere. Everything is connected to everything, and you need to protect everything inside. There are nodes which are compromised on this picture. They are brown and they're isolated. They're not connecting to anything else. That's my view of a cyber fortress, and I'll explain how to protect the endpoint in just a few minutes. In the old paradigm, in the idea of a normal fortress, in order to breach the security, you had to invest a significant level of resources. You had to invest at least 3 times the manpower to breach the wall. Today, even a single guy somewhere across the globe can penetrate your defenses with a cheap exploit, get all of your data, get out of your perimeter without you even noticing. So the price has changed, and what we need to do is we need to increase significantly the price of exploitation. To increase the price of exploitation, we have to protect the nodes in a way which is non-standard. You cannot rely on antiviruses. I'm sure all of you know that. And it's very difficult to rely on intrusion detection systems because they only look for patterns which are known. Heuristics and anomaly detection, unfortunately, is still not ready. And In this case, we need to harden the systems in unconventional ways. This presentation is focused only on that. You know, who is attacking us according to the media? It's the APT, right? And APT has been in every single marketing material, in every single device which is being sold right now, every single appliance. They advertise the ability to detect and protect against APT. Well, the problem is you cannot really protect against APTs. I mean, to protect against APTs, you need to decrease their motivation. You need to get rid of their motivation. And APT is not a technology which you're protecting for. You are basically protecting from the sniper. And to protect from the sniper, it's best to get out of the way of the rifle, or become invisible to the sniper, or grow a shell which is so difficult to penetrate that the sniper will not shoot because he knows he'll not get through. And for that, you need to become an advanced persistent defender, APD, which is a new term. To become an advanced persistent defender, standard learning is not enough. And standard education, which you get in the university, is definitely not enough. Because the guys you're fighting against are people who educate themselves day and night. They share knowledge day and night. They study new techniques all the time. And they didn't learn that in the university. In order to become an advanced persistent defender, you need to act in the same way. And you need to learn different kind of knowledge from what you can get from study books. Right, so this is the foundation. The foundation is just several books, a few books, which I recommend, which will lay the foundation of your growing as advanced persistent defenders. Of you being able to build a cyber fortress, you need some strategy knowledge, and the strategy knowledge is your base. Even though it's not technical, even though it's not fancy, but it's your base. Without a base, it will be very, very difficult to build on. So, the art of war. Many of you have heard about the art of war. It is laying the foundation of making a proper balance of power, of knowing when to attack, when to defend and when to flee, how to build your defenses. The art of war has been known across the hacker community for probably 20, 30 years, very well known. The two books following after have not been so known. The Art of Warfare by, some say, grandson of Sun Tzu, which is not definite because he might have lived several hundred years after Sun Tzu, is also a very good book. And the Book of Five Rings is a Japanese one. So The Art of War and The Art of Warfare are two books which are written by Chinese generals. And the Book of Five Rings has been written by a Japanese warrior. Some say that Book of Five Rings is being used by Yakuza to run all their business operations. And if the criminals are using this book for strategy, it might be a good idea for you as well to at least to read it. When you read these three books, which will lay the foundation of your understanding of warfare, try to think about parallels to the cyber world. And by reading once or twice, you will see that there are a lot of parallels. The best of 2600 2600 was and it still is a magazine published for dozens of years. And by reading the best of 2600, you will lay a very good foundation for yourself, a very deep understanding of the whole history of cybersecurity. When you build this understanding, you will be easily able to build everything else which I'm going to be talking about in this presentation later on. Now, Stealing the Network is a series of books. This series is a series of novels. It's sometimes very unexpected from a cybersecurity expert to read novels to understand security. But it's a fact. And they are really extremely good novels explaining attacks in a captivating way. And when you finish them, you will see why they have been valuable to you, to understanding how attacks work in the real world and how to prevent such attacks in the future. Hacking Exposed is for people who are not very technical and who want to understand the technical side of cybersecurity, written in a simple way, explaining in a shallow way, but a lot of attacks. So if you're not technical, this is a very good book for you. And Security Intelligence is a book which will help you. It should be the last one you read in this series. It will help you build the security infrastructure in your company in a proper way. The whole book is extremely technical. If you're not the one who is building the security of your organization, maybe you will not need it. Now, as Sun Tzu says, being unconquerable lies with yourself. You cannot influence the enemy in any way. You cannot change them. You can only change yourself. You can only change the security posture of your organization. When you change that, you've become unconquerable. You've solved your task. As you can see, one of the primary points in this slide is removing the perimeter defenses. If you keep the perimeter defenses on, you will rely on a feeling of security which is not realistic. It is very far from being realistic. When you remove the perimeter defenses, you will start thinking about protecting the things which need protection. This is business applications and endpoints and servers. If you protect them, you really don't need perimeter defenses. Two companies that I know of have done this. The first company is Google, and the second is Coca-Cola. I've not heard of any other big name which has successfully removed perimeter defenses yet. But with two great examples, two very big companies, two very complex companies, I don't know, probably much more complex than any of us will ever work on. If they were able to do it, it should be very achievable for us as well. And I'll try to explain how they did it based on a white paper which Google published. Right. So Google, removing the perimeter defenses, they rely on several infrastructure elements. One of the primary infrastructure elements is their CMDB, Configuration Management Database. Their Configuration Management Database consists of several other configuration management databases for all the operating systems they have in place. But they have one meta CMDB which contains information from all of these databases. This gives them information about all devices. They also have a meta database of all their users, and the two databases are two key points in their new infrastructure. Whenever a device tries to connect to the network, it is being checked if this device is present in the CMDB. If it's present in the CMDB, its security posture is being checked. If it's updated, if it's up to date, if it contains any malicious software or doesn't. And if everything is fine with the device, then a certificate from this device is being presented to the access proxy. Then the access proxy checks with the access control engine. Then the user is being checked from the user database. But the important thing is that they don't rely in the whole process of authentication to a corporate system. They don't rely anywhere on a perimeter defense. What they rely on is the integrity of databases, integrity of end user devices, and authentication and access granted to a specific user. It works the same way as it works with your Facebook accounts right now. Facebook is providing you an application. Unfortunately, Facebook only cares about your username and password, probably for some of you, maybe a second layer authentication. So Google has maybe 3 layers of authentication. They have a username, they have a password, they have second factor authentication, and they also have the device. Now, let's see an example, a practical example. You have a payroll, which is one of the key components, one of the key, let's say, it's a very confidential information in the company. And you have a cafe, and you have a dashboard showing some information for developers. You need 3 levels of controls. You need three layers of permission. For the payroll, you need to have device authentication, user authentication. You need to ensure that the device is actively managed. And also you need to ensure that the patch level is up to date. Well, this is all good. For the dashboard, you don't need such stringent checks, of course. And for the cafe menu, you only need to authenticate the device. And it's a very complex system. And there are several challenges here let's say, for us to build such a system. For us, the challenges would be in building the CMDB, ensuring it's up to date. And there are not many systems currently on the market. Google wrote their own with the help of Puppet. Let's look forward to Google making the system open source. Yeah, currently this is not available, but we'll be able to build it in a few months, I hope, when Google makes it open source. And there are clear usability beneficial impacts in this case. It just works. You don't have to rely on VPN. Whenever you need to provide access to a user, to some corporate infrastructure element, you just rely that whenever they try to connect, they have full access. They have whenever you ensure that the device is correct, that the device has the proper certificate on it, that the device has the patch level, the proper operating system, it has proper configuration, then you trust the device. Then if the user has all the permissions, you don't need a VPN. And it's very difficult to compromise this system. Extremely difficult. Imagine you're a hacker, your device will not be able to even connect. But let's say it's best for you to review this very detailed white paper on your own, because this is not the focus of this presentation. the focus of this presentation will be on what can be done today. What can be done today are other things which are not even mentioned on the Google white paper, and that is exploit prevention, that is hardening, and I will show you hands-on what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. The first, you need to ensure you know your network and you know your business environment very well. To know it very well, you can have automated scanners for vulnerabilities. You can have several penetration tests. Unfortunately, a penetration test only focuses on several % of your network, not the whole network. Whenever a penetration test is successful, they stop and they deliver you the report. This is not enough. Although I respect penetration tests as one of the clearest ways to check the security of your organization, it's unfortunately not broad enough. To have a broad picture, you have automated scanners, but it is best to run manual assessments. For manual assessments, I recommend CSET. A CSET is a tool developed by the Homeland Defense Organization of the States. And I'll show you in just a second how it works. You will be able to run it in your own companies. It's free to download for now. So just go ahead, download it, and you'll find it useful, I'm sure. Right. CSET. I'll just spend a couple of minutes on it. We'll create an assessment, and this assessment is manual. The value of this assessment, when you do it, and you collect evidence, it is similar, let's say it's similar to what you will do during an ISO 27001 assessment. But ISO auditors are focused on one thing. They're focused on you, on helping you pass and get the ISO certificate. If you're looking for the security of your organization, you're not focused on passing, you're focused on actually ensuring you have the proper controls. And, well, the resolution here is not helping me. Just a second. Okay, the resolution is not helping me. Anyway. I'll pass this and I'll just explain how it works. It works with very popular standards. Oh man, okay. I'm sure you're familiar with 853 NIST publication. This CSET tool is helping you to create assessments which deliver reports based on popular cybersecurity standards, different from ISO. And it creates very good reports. What I'm suggesting you to do when you run the assessments and you collect evidence from your teams is to ensure everything they say is true manually. And with that, I'm halting this and continuing to more practical examples. You'll be able to download CSET on your own. It's very easy to use. It's basically a checklist. Let's move on to the more practical side. What you need to do is focus on the softest parts of your network. The softest part of your network is the endpoint device, and it's the endpoint browser right now. Unfortunately, in many organizations, browsers are deployed as they are. They're deployed. Usually either you use Internet Explorer or Chrome, but Chrome is not hardened. And if Chrome is not hardened, then you're not doing anything. Exploits will still be able to easily bypass. So I'll show you very quickly how to harden Chrome. Let's go to, oh, I forgot one thing. Everything I'm talking about, every single idea I'm sharing now is written in a book. The book which I wrote and which will be given for free at the end, you'll get a free copy. So it's a very broad topic, many broad topics. They're very difficult to cover in a single hour, in 1 hour. It's impossible. So if I miss anything, it will be in the book, and you just download the book and use it. So let's move on. Chrome hardening. First, to harden Chrome, you need to deploy it properly. The only deployment guide which I found good enough is the NSA deployment guide for deploying Chrome securely. Let's just go through the configuration options in the group policy for Google Chrome. Just a sec. This is the most important setting, is allowing running plugins which are outdated. You should disable this setting. It should be disabled. Whenever you have Flash or Java or any other plugin which is outdated, this policy directly disables it, and an exploit will not be able to use it. Then we have two very handy options for creating a whitelist and a blacklist of URLs. We all know that blacklists are useful. Whitelists are very difficult to administer, but still, having a whitelist of URLs is the most secure best practice to run, to allow users to browse the internet. I know it's very difficult to administer, but once you create a baseline with a whitelist, it gets much easier. So if you run statistics on your network, if you run statistics for a month and add the sites you trust to the whitelist, then it's much easier to add new URLs to the whitelist whenever somebody wants to visit it, wants to visit the website. This is best achieved with a web proxy. And when you buy a web proxy or when you configure a web proxy, it is best to select an option for automatically notifying the administrator whenever somebody tries to access a URL and it's not in the database. The user can just click add this, I want to request permission, it gets sent to the admin. But without a whitelist, it's very difficult because now we have malvertising, we have hacked sites, you have exploit kits, and it's very difficult to maintain the security of your organization if your web browsing is not secure. I'll show you how to create a whitelist with Chrome, just with group policy. And this is with these two settings. Block access to a list of URLs and allow access to a list of URLs. If you want to create a whitelist, you block everything by creating a policy here, and in the list you just enter an asterisk. That's it. Now all URLs are blocked, and to allow a list of URLs, you just list them here. You have up to 1,000. This is not applicable for all situations, and it is applicable in only the most sensitive of environments. But I'm just showing that it can be done with group policies, and it's best done on your web proxy. This is just to show you that it's possible on the group policy editor. Right. There are many other settings here which I don't have the time to discuss. All of them you will be able to find in the NSA deployment guide for Google Chrome. Now, Google Chrome needs to be protected from malvertising. Your browsers, your users need to be protected from malvertising. To protect from malvertising, you can use your web filters ability to block advertisement, but you can also use a plugin or extension here, which is uBlock. The reason I'm recommending uBlock is because AdBlock has signed agreements with 300 ad networks to whitelist them and still allow them. So if any of the 300 networks is allowed and is compromised, then your usage of ad blocking plugin is meaningless. uBlock has no such agreements, and uBlock has much more options, which I'll show you now. One of the most important aspects is the multitude of filters you have. As you can see, there is also a Russian filter. Why is this important? It's important because from my experience, a lot of incidents happen when malvertising is used. And the most effective way to block malvertising is to block ads. It's a very simple solution, extremely simple solution, and it is extremely effective solution. If you enable malvertising blocking in your company, if you block ads, you will get rid of 10 to 30% of all security incidents, which is a really high number, and it's a really cheap solution from an effort perspective. And it will be really a shame if you don't implement this. Now, another plugin is uMatrix. And when you visit I don't think I have internet here. But when you visit a URL, you'll be able to, if something doesn't work, you just whitelist it by clicking here. And it is for technical users. It's not for deploying across the whole enterprise. But I recommend it for you if you care about your own safety and protection. Just use these two plugins. They'll get rid of malvertisement very effectively. Next, we want to protect Flash. And Flash, in 99% of the organizations, is not hardened and is not protected in any way. Let's hope it is being updated. But I'm sure in many organizations it is not. But let's imagine a dream world where your company is updating Flash constantly. Let's improve the situation by also hardening Flash. And you do this by following, this is also in the book, but you follow a guide which is by Adobe for hardening Flash. What you do is you go to Windows System 32 Macromedia. Let's just find it. Flash. And there is a configuration file which by default on many systems does not exist. So you just edit it. And the only setting which is usually present is silent auto update enable. What I'm adding here are these settings which are all mentioned in the Adobe administration guide for Flash, which effectively when your browser is when your Flash plugin is compromised by exploit, usually the exploit tries to download a file, even if it's a JPEG or something else. Then on disk it decrypts the file and executes it. If you disable the functionality to download files in Flash, if you disable the functionality to use sockets, and if you disable access to the file system to Flash, then you get rid of a lot of exploits. And this is very useful. And I really recommend that you harden Flash. Next, we have whitelisting. Of course, it's good to have most likely you will not be able to implement it due to the administration costs. But if you implement a secure deployment as in the NSA guide, you'll be fine. Now, my best friend is Emmet. Emmet is my best friend because it's easy to administer and it's a very cheap way to increase the cost of exploitation. Because there are bypasses for Emmet. There are some companies like Offensive Security and others who have developed bypasses for Emmet. But to bypass Emmet is very difficult. And most exploit writers, most exploit kits do not contain ways to bypass Emmet. Emmet is a very small application. It's, in most cases, it will not crash your systems. If it happens, I'll show you how to troubleshoot it. It's very easy. Oh, let's go to the Emmet administration, if I have my mouse. Right. By default, when you install Emmet, it will be in the recommended security settings. As soon as you install it, you can change to maximum security settings. For me, I have not found big impact. Then, if an app crashes, by default, this is all you need to do. But if an app crashes inside your network, some user complains that, let's say, Internet Explorer crashes all the time for them, and it displays the Emmet pop-up. Or Word crashes for them, or anything else crashes for them all the time. It's caused by Emmet, by incompatibility with your antivirus. Then you just go to the app settings, and in your event logs, you will see which protection for this specific user is triggering the crash. You just uncheck this protection, leave all the other protections on, you'll be fine. If you're not able to, you just find the protection which is causing the crash on this particular system and uncheck it. Just do it on a case-by-case basis, because on 95% or 99% of your organization's computers, you will not have any crashes. And it's best to leave all protections on. By now, hopefully you've got rid of malvertising. You got rid of exploits to a large degree. And it has been very cheap. It's been done by just deploying Chrome, just deploying a couple of extensions, and Emmet. This, in a practical situation, takes for a 1,000, 2,000 employee network, it takes 2 weeks of work. With testing, with proper testing. Right. Next is software restriction policies and app locker. With SRP, you can easily block several attack vectors. You can block execution from removable drives with a single policy setting, and you can block execution from temporary locations. By blocking execution from temporary locations, everything which is getting downloaded by an exploit on your browser and tries to execute, it will be blocked by a simple policy setting. Let me just show quickly how it's done. So in the group policy editor, you go to Windows settings, security settings. Again, this is all in the book, just in case you miss it. Software restriction policies, additional rules. Oh, which system is that? Okay. Now, I have two sets of policies. One set is for the admins, and the other set of policy is for the regular users. This is needed because you cannot block all installations. And if you block execution from temporary locations, the installations break. So what you need to do for your regular users, you need a software restriction policy which is blocking most of the things. And for your admin users, you're blocking almost nothing. And to do that, you create two sets of policies. To create the two sets of policies in an enterprise environment, you would create two organizational units or two groups. in a local environment, in a work group situation, like in my virtual machine, you need to run MMC, add a new snap-in, add the group policy object, then you browse and you select in the users non-administrators. This group is not visible in the generic user and group management, but it's visible here. So in order to see the non-admin group policies, you select this. And now we'll see all the additional rules. You see, I'm blocking all temporary locations for non-admin users. With this, if I change the user, oops. If I change the user, I can still execute applications which are allowed, but I cannot execute any installers or anything which tries to write in the temp folder. Unfortunately, I cannot see the installer I had here, but if I had the installer here, it would not run anyway. You know, live demos. I see that I have only 15 minutes. And for 15 minutes, I'll show you the most important part of this presentation. Everything else is still in the book. The most important part of this presentation is sticks. If you're not familiar with the concept of security technical implementation guides, you should get familiar, because this is the most important part of this talk. Sticks are being developed by Defense Information Systems Agency of the States. Unfortunately, no other country, no other organization has spent the effort which DISA has spent. And sticks are basically, imagine all of your corporate systems, all operating systems, all switches, all routers, everything. Every single setting which is capable of improving the security of this device or application or an operating system is detailed in the security technical implementation guides of DISA. They're XML files, and I'll show you how to work with them in just a second. Just a moment. Oh, this is a shame. All right. I should have internet connection. Just a moment. All right. I should have had the viewer here, but it has been wiped by snapshot. Give me just a moment, I'll download it quickly in 1 minute. Guys, do we have a wireless network here? We have a wireless network? No. PhD, okay. Limited connected, cool. Give me a moment. While I'm searching for it, I'll just explain quickly. The sticks are XML documents which you can view with the stick viewer. Everything I'm trying to explain now, which crashed now, everything is explained in the book, which you'll get a free copy at the end of the presentation. Sticks, you work with them by in two ways. There is an online stick viewer, which has all the sticks online. Then you download an Excel file. Let's say you want to protect Chrome or you want to protect a router. You go to the stick viewer and you see all the security settings. You export them to an Excel spreadsheet and you give them to the network team or Windows admin team or whoever is taking care of the device. They create a template which is applied to all your devices, or it's done manually. But in all cases, using a stick is the most effective way to harden a system and to harden every single setting inside. I've not found anywhere a way to harden a system better than using a stick. Right, it seems that I got finally. Oh, not really. Internet access is sketchy. Anyway, it's in the book. I have 10 minutes. Just read about sticks in the book, okay? Further hardening. Consider that on your workstations and on your servers, you have executables which are not needed. These executables, though, are very useful during a compromise. And the most useful of them is PowerShell. If you get rid of PowerShell on all systems which don't need it, then you get rid of, let's say, some people call PowerShell post-exploitation framework. And there is a reason for that. All of these executables, again, the list is in the book. All of these executables are used during a compromise. If you delete them, and whenever you need them, you can bring them on an external device or on a network share, then you get rid of ways for an attacker to make their life easy, you make their life difficult. For patching, it's best to use the CVSS patching policy, not just rely on patching on your own ideas of patching. If you Google CVSS patching policy, you'll see what I'm talking about. Is a preference of speed of patching depending on the exploit criticality. Honey-nets, honeypots, encryptions, and cloud providers. Now, adding smoke and mirrors and making yourself invisible and creating intelligence for understanding attackers is done with honey-nets and honeypots. To understand how attackers are compromising your network, it's best to run a honey-net and a honeypot. And when you run them inside your network and monitor what is happening in your honeypots, you will gain intelligence which is in some ways better than buying a subscription intelligence for your SIEM solution. Now, you need to differentiate. Besides everything else I've talked about until now, you need to differentiate among your infrastructure elements. In order to make the life of an attacker much more difficult, for example, you might want to not use a certain vendor for your firewall or a certain vendor for your router, because we all know that some vendors recently became known for placing backdoors into their systems. I'll not mention any names, but a good alternative for routers, for example, is BSD Router Project. By performance, and of course, it cannot be as high performing as other products. You basically need twice as powerful the processor. That's it, and a little bit more memory. Then for a firewall, a big organization cannot use this. a small organization can. So if your organization is several hundred people, you don't really need to buy a commercial firewall. You only need to use pfSense or OpenSense. If you're using Bind as your DNS server, you should stop as soon as possible, really. Because Bind has been known for vulnerabilities, and DJB DNS, on the other hand, has been known of having almost none vulnerabilities. So it's a good idea to at least test DJB DNS, to at least put it on a side-by-side comparison with Bind. Maybe you will find that DJB DNS is all you need. Next is KubesOS. Can everybody who has used KubesOS raise their hand? One? Okay, 3 people. Out of this room, on a security conference, this is a shame, really. I urge you to download KubesOS. It only runs on a hardware box. It cannot run in a virtual environment. But as of now, this is the most secure operating system you can run. The most secure free operating system you can run. Of course, there are Integrity OS and QNX, but KubesOS is one which you can use. It can be used even by non-technical users. It's basically, for the user, it's a Linux box. And for a Linux box, what users mostly miss today is their Office package. For the Office package, you can try on Linux, you can try running Kingsoft Office. Has anyone used Kingsoft Office? No? Okay, try it. Kingsoft Office is almost as good as Microsoft Office, and it's free, and it's much better than LibreOffice or OpenOffice. It's built by a Chinese company. Maybe that's why most people have not heard about it. But one benefit of Kingsoft Office, even on Windows systems, is Visual Basic malware cannot run. And we all know that Visual Basic is one of the key vectors to compromise corporate environments, besides malvertising, besides exploit kits. Desktop BSD is another option. Now, some people are more targeted than others in a corporate environment. And these people are usually the CEO's assistants. The CEO's assistant does not necessarily need a Windows operating system. The CEO's assistant might get by with Kingsoft Office on a Linux box and maybe a good email client, and most of the times that's all they need. If you protect the most targeted users in such a way, you increase the security for your organization significantly. And that's what I mean by differentiation. It's best to differentiate the operating systems you run in your environment. Whenever you can, run Linux instead of the Windows desktop. Whenever you can, on the IT desktops, you can run KubesOS. It's not necessary to run Windows. So, yeah. I have just 4 minutes. This is the book URL. The book, I've spent months in writing it. This presentation was supposed to compress everything in 1 hour. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to compress everything in 1 hour. So creating a cyber fortress is this book. Just go ahead and read it. It's free, you know. Any questions? We have a few minutes, so I'll welcome any questions, please.
Коллеги, вопросы?
Thank you. Talk. You advise to use white lists of URLs, but you don't say use white lists for applications.
Application whitelisting is a very good idea. And application whitelisting can be achieved with software restriction policies and app locker And achieving this, the way to achieve this is in the book.
Okay.
Yes, application whitelisting is extremely important. And it's also extremely important to monitor any execution of any application which is not in the whitelist. Because application whitelisting with app locker and software restriction policies can be bypassed. It has been proven to be bypassed, so you need to monitor. And there are ways to monitor with free tools. Monitoring with free tools is also in the book, and commercial tools, everything is inside.
Можно на русском, да?
Да, можно на русском. Я просто...
Can you talk Russian? Yes. Thank you very much. You've collected many thoughts into one piece. Question. Have you seen? Could you implement this? All you mentioned about into one enterprise? Yes.
Yes, this has been implemented. I've participated in such implementations. How to convince your management to implement these ideas and ways to communicate your ideas to higher management are also in the book. So I've tried to help to cover everything which you might need inside. Your biggest challenge in implementation of all of these is convincing management that they can risk such implementation, because such implementations are risky. Application whitelisting is risky, web URL whitelisting is risky, and management is usually trying to avoid risks. So if you are able to communicate to them properly, they will give you a test environment. If you prove that it works in the test environment, they will give you green light to implement it in production. Just be careful and always prove yourself in a test environment. That's what I can recommend.
Раз вопросов нет, спасибо.